We're going to be discussing supply chain issues, which to me, usually always when you tell me supply chain, I think of the ever-given Suez incident.
Perfect example of single point failure last year with the WordPress. One hosting company was cut from the accessing the code on the public repository. And that caused a lot of trouble and a lot of concerns about how secure the WordPress is, how secure the open source is.
Normally it's that they don't apply security by default or security by design strategies on their development processes, right? Being in the situation that you have a server, component, but a lot of pieces, you have a long trust chain to depend on. So there is a lot of teams working on your software in the, not directly, but in those libraries you rely on, right?
There's a general awareness that security seems to be important, but it never ends up being a real priority for most people. Oftentimes it all just boils down to that. Again, the incentives are just not there for establishing security as one of the fundamental requirements of just putting something out there.
Nobody will buy this software where it's not in the same line as all the standards, all the regulations ask for. Because when someone is buying software, they are buying the possible issue, and they want to avoid that issue.
We have the Cyber Resilience Act coming very soon. It's, I think, going to be applicable from 2026, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It is enforced right now, but especially fines gonna start coming into 2026.
Hi, folks, and thank you for joining us today. With me, I have Alain Schlesser, who is the principal architect at Yoast and also the maintainer of WP-CLI. With him, I have Darius Sveikauskas from Patchstack, the head of database, and I have our superstar engineer, Nestor Angulo de Ugarte from Patchstack also. So today we're going to be discussing supply chain issues, which to me, usually always when you tell me supply chain, I think of the ever-given Suez incident. So if any of you good folks would like to explain to me what exactly we mean when we discuss supply chain and open source software, that would be just perfect.
So basically it's we can call it the process of getting all the pieces of code of software when we need them. So if something is in the chain is broken, we have a problem. So the example you said about that ship that blocked the channel, basically it showed how fragile the world is when you can't get the shipments. But at the same time, we had a perfect example of single point failure, controlled single failure last year with the WordPress. One hosting company was cut from the accessing the code on the public repository, and that caused a lot of trouble and a lot of concerns about how secure the WordPress is and how secure the open source is.
Nestor, from your experience, you have a lot of experience in the past when it comes to security. What are some problems you have seen that are related to supply chain that companies very tangibly feel?
Normally it's that they don't apply security by default or security by design strategies on their development processes, right? So being in the situation that you have a server, component, but a lot of pieces, you have a long trust chain to depend on. So there is a lot of teams working on your software in the, not directly, but in those libraries you rely on, right? So at the end is that you have to rely on all of these each other teams. If they don't apply any kind of basic security measures into the software and these kind of things, you are just basically
Yeah, you're ruined.
Yeah, I would
Let's
say.
put it mildly. Yeah. What have been your experiences with the supply chain issues in OS?
Yeah, so it is something that is always, like you told, my concern for the tooling that is used for deploying WordPress sites. So with WP-CLI, that has always been one of the major concerns that we're looking into. In the past, we have tried to work through some of the requirements to have a more secured end-to-end supply chain, but it's only one portion that WP-CLI Direct can take care of. So it needs really an involvement from all the actors to come together and think about it, how you really can cover the entire flow from Interact. WP-CLI is only one part of that. We mostly tried to improve the way that you pull in plugins and themes from the free plugin repositories like Voicebase, for example, and allowing you to have 4 updates to know that you didn't get the malicious updates somewhere along the way. Those are the areas where WP-CLI, where I was direct.
Yes. I think that goes a long way towards not making this an individual effort. Because what we're seeing a lot is, I think, every company for itself. Essentially, there is not a unified push towards making the supply chain stronger. But I think that's going to change. So we have the Cyber Resilience Act coming very soon. It's, I think, going to be applicable from 2026, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It is enforced right now, but especially fines gonna start coming into 2026.
Got it. Absolutely. And so, Alain, I know you have a background as a former government employee. I know that often we put this onus on governments to regulate things, but there are blockers, obviously. So can you maybe speak to some things that have made the Cyber Resilience Act come in 2026 and not 2016? What's holding governments back, basically?
So that there's multiple things that are at play. I've witnessed this now from both sides,
Yeah.
both from internally within the government agencies and from outside as one of the affected venues. And from the government side, first of all, it is a big task to create a legal framework that is generic enough to capture the entirety of a problem space so that you really don't exclude areas inadvertently or create situations where acceptance are needed that are not eased through the legal framework, and at the same time make it specific enough so that it has not only an impact, but it's also enforced. Because the more generic you make something, the less enforceable it becomes. And so it needs a very fine balance that works across the entire problem space to find the ideal setup for do something that is enforceable, but enforceable for the entirety of force. That is a really, really tall order of problem. That's why it takes so long. It requires multiple iterations with all sorts of parties to be involved. Yeah. Still, for all of these frameworks, you mostly can always find parties that disagree that it is properly done. There's always areas where people think it could have been approved. But you need to, at some point, then start applying it and putting it into effective use. And then go from there. Oftentimes, those laws, when they start to become applicable, that is just the initial step. And then there's the effective making, which is basically just, this is what we know now, and now we wait for someone to go in front of trials and for judges to actually test the law and see how well it holds up to practical reality, and then you iterate from there. So it's a very long and complicated process from the government side, but it's also internally, the way governments work is a bit different than the way how the companies work, because the incentives are very different. And when a company wants to achieve something, they put a deadline on it, they put budget on it, they make sure that business incentives align with it. And this business side it is completely omitted from government work. So with government work, it is always thought to probably like the incentives, because you end up with multiple like political parties. Everyone just wants to make sure that they manage responsibility, and there's nothing that forces them to actually become active, like to create something that is actionable. Yeah, so it's very easy for these things to drag along, because there's always someone that is not yet satisfied because there's a legal responsibility on their hand that they're not happy with, and so you have hit the incentives are just really really bad for quick, fast decision making in Gumball's house.
That makes a lot of sense, because what I usually see is we all empathize with the private or public companies, because obviously there's money on the line, there's plans, but with the government, it has its own set of challenges. So yeah, I think it's always good to highlight that.
Yes.
But in terms of businesses, so Nestor, that's your area of expertise. I still remember the big book you sent us of the whole Cyber Resilience Act, just like highlighted passages. What can businesses do? What are the challenges that businesses deal with when it comes to CRA?
I mean, it makes worth to remember that where this kind of things started, especially in the governance part, right? So back in 2021, there was a super big disaster due to our library named as Log4j that affected a lot of companies around the world, right? So as a result of that situation, there was like an executive order for 14,028, I think, like improving national cybersecurity, in which law was more like a guideline. It was enforcing some of the rules that then after that are in the CRA and in Europe, right? So I would say that it started in 2021 there when this happened. Right now, CRA is enforced here in Europe. More or less, it's the same way as the executive order, but it's way more strict in the way that there are fines, there are requirements, and so on, right? So the thing with the regulations is that normally people are thinking on them like, okay, paperwork, and there's a lot of new things to do that makes things super slow in business processes and these kind of things, right? But I would like to see this regulation in particular like as something that's good for the end user, because it's something like, okay, so all the companies in the market has to play with the same rules now in terms of cybersecurity, so end users win here, right? So yeah, I wouldn't say that it's gonna affect a lot into the business processes, because at the end it's just applying like a super basic cybersecurity guidelines, right? Like for example, enforcing the second factor authentication, declaring the whole components of libraries you are depending on, like using SBOM structures. Yeah, there are several requirements there, but they are requirements.
Got it.
So you have to pass through these requirements if you want to go to market in Europe, or if you want to have any kind of Europe citizen using your application any place in the world.
Got it. So you mentioned SBOM. So for our viewers, could you explain what SBOM is?
I mean, the best example I would say is imagine that you are hungry and there is a cake in front of you, right? So, but also imagine that you have any kind of allergy to any kind of ingredient. I don't know, nuts, jQuery, Log4j, whatever.
Yes, that's the same thing.
You tell me, right? So if you don't have the list of ingredients of that cake, you can't rely on eating it safely, right?
Yeah.
So if you eat it, it can go right or it can go wrong, and then you just get your business down for a while. Let's say in the easiest way. So if you, by opposite, you have the list of ingredients, you can decide if that cake is appropriate for you, right? So the same part happens with the applications. We consume a lot of applications. We consume a lot of libraries in our software. So I would say that it's kind of logic that there should be a list of, okay, what I'm consuming at all, a whole list of what I consume.
Yeah.
So that's what the SBOM does. It's just a list of ingredients, all the applications where all the libraries where that your application, that your software depends on, and versions that they are installed right now. So it's something that evolves with the time, has to be updated continuously. Every time there is an update or every time there is a library, a new library, something like that has to be added to that. So we keep like a live list of what is
in there.
right?
Got it. And so in WordPress space, usually when we talk about components, we talk about plugins. And so Darius, what can plugin developers do?
Patchstack in the past 3 years processed almost 10,000 reports, like the valid ones. I'm talking about those that are real ones. You know, I was the one person who's basically made all the communication with the plugin and theme developers. And the first issue is like getting in touch with those plugin developers. So, for example, we saw like thousands of broken contact forms, zero any contact details on the plugin pages or websites of the developers and so on. So one of the things that the CRE Act actually asks for is like availability of tools to contact the vendor, so we can actually report vulnerabilities. And one of those tools is MVDP program. So basically, each vendor can has like his own VDP program, or he can or they can actually use the managed vulnerability disclosure program like Patchstack provides right now for free for basically all the developers who are working with the WordPress app assistant.
Got it. But also these kinds of programs, they make things easier, right? You don't have to deal with things like bug bounty.
Yeah, we are reducing the white noise. Some of the people in the security industry produces, I mean, those like researchers, let's call them researchers who trying to convince vendors that they found something valuable, but at the end of the day, we see that those reports are like nothing to worry about, because it's more about trying to convince the vendor that he needs to like pay some kind of bounty for some fake vulnerability. But yeah, Patchstack makes it possible to avoid all those things, to get the information about the report as soon as possible and mitigate the effects that could be like caused by vulnerability itself.
Got it. Yeah. So it sounds like it's easy. Actually, we're actually very privileged to be able to stand here and discuss these things because we understand them. We are in the industry. But when it comes to the actual knowledge of the general public, Alain, I know you've done a lot of great work with the hackathon, this Cloudfest. Do you feel like people understand that we should be thinking about the supply chain in OSS? Or what are our awareness levels?
Yeah, so there's a general awareness that security seems to be important, but it never ends up being a real priority for most people, because again, and oftentimes it all just boils down to that. Again, the incentives are just not there for establishing security as one of the fundamental requirements of just putting something out there. And what I see a lot is that people, they generally have like a list of best practices that they know about, that they think if they cover those best practices, that is security. But there's no fundamental thinking about the implications of what their architecture actually means, and what high-level flaws they are actually introducing by just how they lay out things and how they plan things. So this concept of security by design, it is not having a checklist of random details, but it's having a systematic approach of making sure that you cannot possibly have a gap in your security thinking. And that type of awareness, I don't really see it anywhere that I'm actively participating in. So there's very few people that really have this systematic approach. They just think that security is a checklist, and once you went through that checklist, you're fine.
Yeah, that's just not the case. You have to do an in-depth audit of your unique weaknesses
Yeah, it's very easy to think about check, but I know, Nestor, you probably see now the business situation. But can you give us like 3-step process how to actually prepare for things like CRA for mitigating and why change? What would you say if the first piece start for a day?
I mean, still it requires a lot of time to answer because for the big version, CRA, it's not only some of the versions that Darius that they were Alain, as I mentioned, there's quite these primaries there. But I would say that just like back to the beginning of the interview, I would say that the client choose the security by design, not security by default principles. It's very best way of use starting to be much more the security rather than a specific measure because CRA has a lot of preference. So it's important to defer those concepts. It's not the same security by design that by default. Security by design is kind of proactive measures you get from the moment you are start developing, even before.
Okay.
So it's something like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and before doing actually this, I have to think about what is the security scope of this application, risk, and so on, right? So these days we have a big conflict because people want to ship fast into market. They want to do things and then they can fix it later on if they feel there is a problem. Making the audience tester a better tester itself. So the idea of the CRA is totally the opposite. Okay, so you can ship fast, not that faster, but you can ship fast. But you before conceptualizing the application or the thing that you want to build, you have to think on security first, right?
Got it.
So after that, you can start doing actual thing, right? Developing. So security by default is, okay, so I'm going to ship something into market,
Okay.
but without any kind of user interaction, what I shipped into market has to have some minimum requirements of cybersecurity, right?
it.
For example, login second factor authentication. If I gonna do any kind of update, separate updates into security updates and feature related updates, release notes, clear release notes with information about what they are doing, especially in the part of security, keeping good practices in the way of, for example, sharing keys or sharing settings information, these kind of things, right? So also sanitizing the code and so on. But what I mean is, okay, I'm gonna ship right now, and by default, it's secure. So what you do after that is more on you as user or as administrator. So those two concepts are the best advice I will do, or I will give for any company out there or any developer, any vendor out there of plugins to apply right now, starting right now.
Got it. Yeah, to me, sorry, did you want to say something?
And I was just thinking when you mentioned ship fast, there's this trend that seems to be going on.
Yep.
Where I know a few decades back, software engineering was this discipline where you really tried to be very rigorous, very systematic.
Yeah, wonderful.
Was expensive to produce code and to maintain code. So a lot of planning went into it, and a lot of knowledge and academic research went into it. And now we're moving more and more towards it's cool to just hack something together and not care too much about the concept.
Absolutely.
And what we're seeing now with the CRA, and that is generally for all of these frameworks, like GDPR and with Nestor and so on. What we generally see is there's a legal framework that is being created because we keep doing it wrong, because the market just cannot figure it out on its own. The market is trending in the wrong direction. That's where our regulation needs to step in, because the market on its own.
I think that's the positive side of it, because I think when we discuss new regulations, it often feels like, oh my God, the government is punishing me. I'm gonna get a fine. So I think in this sense, it's very consultative in a way. For example, it's a way to check if what you're building actually meets the standards instead of just shipping fast and breaking things.
Whenever the kids doesn't behave, police have to get in and say, okay, so all parents have to come here and say, no, this is the way.
Yeah.
So you don't behave by yourself, that's the point.
Yeah. hopefully without, getting a fine in the beginning, like first offenders. But yeah, I do agree with you guys that it is good to think about it holistically. It is good to have a structured approach when you're considering supply chain for yourself. You have to understand what your unique weaknesses are. And that also is something that the software bill of materials helps with. So that was your group's hackathon project. So what happened? What went down?
We had a very fun weekend. As a team, we learned a lot because even if I were a co-lead of one of the groups, the one related with the supply chain security, I learned a lot. So it was super fun to came along all together into a solution. We were discussing the first 2 hours about what to do about supply chain security. Actually, we just proposed some ideas there, but the group just ended on the situation that, okay, so the very first step is that we need a list of libraries that every software has, right? So we were checking about in the ecosystem, in the software open source ecosystem, if there is any more or less well-established solution about that. It wasn't, right? So we ended up creating like an open source library called Sbominator.
Oh,
We got a lot of fun with
it's
the name.
Dominator.
So you can imagine how much fun we got during the process. So the thing is, during the hackathon, we ended on a solution, open source solution to work towards this software bill of material in the open source ecosystem, and also kind of CMS agnostic. So we don't want to stick into WordPress is ruling right now 40% of the internet, more or less. But it doesn't mean that the rest of CMS configures it to be secure. So we ended up with a very light library, EHP library, that you can plug into any different CMS out there. So you can generate that SBOM report as it is mandatory by the CRA, for example, in any web application out there.
So is Abominator 3000 is in live? You would use it today.
I mean, it still needs some work, but it's mainly, is during a weekend, it's not easy to finish a array for production product, but it's pretty near to product or to produce. So I invite anyone that is listening this interview that want to contribute to this library. Is open. There is a lot of information there, so we can share it after or link it to this interview. But you can find it in GitHub as Sbominator or Sbominator 3000. You can just get in and start contributing because that's what is open source about, right? Collaboration. All right, go ahead.
Yes, like complete security LED file. But yes, like already a PDT program.
I mean,
Yes.
I wouldn't say that, not that right now at this moment, but yeah, it has as SBOM, in fact, SBOM report. No, not the VPs. That's another requirement for the CRA that we have.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that any contributor out there that can do is, for example, check if there is a VDP and add it into the README file, for example.
Got it. So just to clarify all these abbreviations for the listeners, VDP as in Vulnerability Disclosure Program, yeah? Okay.
It's
PDP is
Managed.
Disclosure program. Then PDP program is provided by the third part.
Got it.
I mean, the idea here is that as we were mentioning about in the very beginning, people receive big bounties, the vulnerability that did that maybe might not know or just exist, but not all the developers out there has the skills to validate that the vulnerability exists, right? So having an external program which collects these vulnerabilities, wannabes, and then validate them, and then supply with all the communication with all the parties and so on, and then also create all the disclosure program and so on, is what a BDP is about. And it's something that is also, as I mentioned before, enforced in the CRA. So it's going to be needed for sure.
Got it. Okay. So if for the ecosystem at large, I'm hearing hackathon projects, I'm hearing MVDPs, I'm hearing a lot of things, but is there a concentrated effort to get all of these requirements in a productized way? Or are we just the guy who came with a digger, the Suez Canal, and try to get of the issue? Like, where are we at? Who wants to go first? You're smiling shadily. You're smiling shadily.
We at the beginning.
Okay.
All the regulations about putting like market PBM in that market to
Yeah.
common sense and stage. And finally, everyone is starting to talk about stage. Like we are like starting to like doing some of the things, like for example, adding the plugin or team into the BDP program. Maybe like having some cyber hygiene in our company. Anything else? It's like continuous process. It will never end.
I got a question. Is cyber hygiene like wash your hands with soap before you start coding?
Yeah, and wipe the keyboard. No, cyber hygiene is like set. Yes, it's a set of principles how you need to act when you interact with the products, with the software, with anything else that actually processes data, collects data, everything else.
Okay, got it. Alain, what's your vibe check on the status of the ecosystem? Are we getting somewhere?
Yeah, I would also say we're doing the first steps, but those first steps will first create more new problems than they will solve the general issue, because now we will enter a phase where everyone is required to do all sorts of things to comply with the new legal framework, but that in turn questions the current sustainability model. So it will become more and more problematic to just run all of our millions of software projects in a sustainable way, because lots of efforts will now be multiplied across all of those projects, and it will require a consolidation phase and some thought into how we can rethink the sustainability of managing those security approaches with more shared responsibility and more streamlined approaches. That will take some time. So we will hit those sustainability issues first before we start solving them. And so that's, I think we're at the beginning. We made the first steps, but the first steps are always the hardest, and they will open up new problems first before solving the existing ones.
Yeah, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, I would like to like put the extra comment. If you want to see how the like things with CRA Act will go, you should keep in mind how it went with the GDPR.
Yeah.
So it was like mess, absolute chaos at the beginning, but step by step, people are like applying all those practices they are required to apply, and everything is going a bit more smooth.
Yeah. It takes patience. I think it takes patience, but it's also a control mechanism for all of us. Like I always say before going to a party, like check yourself before you wreck yourself, basically, right? But Nestor, what is the one thing that companies can do to start swimming in that chaos? Should they form maybe a mini task force within the team that thinks about these things as almost project leaders for internal compliance? What's actionable?
I mean, the very first thing is, I think, Alain more or less framing it is that the C-level are convinced. I mean, governance has to be convinced that this is something that has to be properly applied into the company, all company process. So this is the very first step. It's fun because we are here in the Cloudfest 2025, and probably the most two words that I see in every of the booths out there is AI and security.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So it's clearly that is something that is in mind of all the people, and also there's more and more into the words used for sales pitch and so on.
Yeah.
But there's something that is mentioned. We are in the very beginning of this transformation, let's say in that way. And there is a lot of false concepts or misconceptions in this part, right? Because people think that, for example, compliance with a regulation is just I'm dumb, I'm secure, or security by checkbox, check, I'm secure, or I don't know. This is like a security theater. Looks like I have to pass the audit. If I pass the audit, I'm done. So it's not about the audit; it's about the controls you have to implement in your company that actually has to be proven for the audition, right?
Got it.
But it's something that is not for passing the audition, or the audit. It's something that continues evolving, because you can pass the audit and get the certification, and then minute after you just do everything wrong again, and it's nothing that you can. It doesn't work, right, in that way. So there's a lot of misconception still at the governance level, but it's something that we are getting in, as we can see in this event.
There's actually an interesting fact you will probably observe, that people will now watch for the requirements that they need to fulfill to be compliant, and they will think that it's just about meeting those requirements. And what is important to highlight is that it's not of meeting requirements, it's some requirements that are put in place to avoid the consequences of something doing fundamentally wrong. And that's people just do what is needed instead of what they should do. And those are just tools to help them do what they should do. And so right now, when there's major security issues for large companies, they are already having like brand reputation management issues with that. But what I assume will happen over time is, now that those regulations will come in place, the end users will be more and more aware of that, and the consequences of actually doing something wrong, of having a major security incident, will be even more devastating for a company, to the point where it can completely ruin a brand if they really get it wrong. So it's not just about taking off those requirements. Those requirements are the milestones that help you move in the right direction, but your goal is not to meet the requirements. Your goal is to do what you can to avoid those major securities.
Exactly.
That is an existential risk for those companies, and will become more and more existential as the end users will become more aware of those dynamics because of legal frameworks, obviously.
I think that's important to point out, because that was going to be my next question. Like, give me one reason why companies should care about supply chain. One tangible reason.
Why should fear about the security?
Yes, about the supply chain security and the CRA. Except, don't tell me fines. Don't tell me fines.
Just
no.
It's like profit. Quick profit.
I will say,
Thinking about profit at that point, because you're like quality that makes the software. Nobody will buy this software, but it's not like in like the same line as all the standards, all the regulations ask for. Because when someone is buying software, they are buying the possible issue, and they want to avoid that issue.
trusting on you, deal. But we have seen with some vendors, whenever we discover a vulnerability, right, that some vendors answer super quickly and super helpful, and some others just ignore the situation or just pass about, right?
Well, I would like to say one thing. Actually, I already saw some wrong comments on the public, like social rappers. People are making like WordPress plugins, for example. They think that if they are not selling the product, it's not like under those regulations. Because anything you provide, like in public as a service, as a product, it doesn't matter. It's already under their regulations.
Interesting.
I'd like to add that for the companies, generally for the success of a long-term company, you maximize opportunities and you minimize and mitigate risks.
Exactly.
Only what you do for
Exactly.
success. If a company has too much focus on only going after opportunities and doesn't properly mitigate those risks, they increase the likelihood of at some point some of those risks with maybe low probability but high impact. All of a sudden they will hit one of those. That can be the end of a firm. So it doesn't matter how much you maximize profit if all of a sudden there is a cutoff date for a company. So you need to do both in a healthy balance. And all we're talking about here, that is this mitigating risk. So it's not enough about growing your company. It's also needed to make sure that your company just doesn't suddenly die.
Yes.
Yeah. It's fun that we are talking about the company profit and why they should, comply with security and so on. But the ultimate goal of, for example, regulation is that the end user doesn't use an application that doesn't have the minimum security. So it's also the other side of the coin, right? It's okay, company has to fulfill this because of profit, because of reputation, because of doing the correct thing or something like that, but also because end users deserve to use something that cares about their security data, their access, and ultimately their health, right, or their wealth.
Exactly. In this day and age, definitely consumers are aware of everything that's out to get them, all the places where their data is being compromised. So as a next step, I think the Cyber Resilience Act and the fact that we're having these discussions, I think it's a good positive signal. So folks, is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience for the finish? Alain, anything you'd like to wrap up with?
I like to get back to the point of thinking about the sustainability of everything we're going through now. We really need to all get together at the same table and discuss how we can tackle these fundamental changes in the security landscape that are coming with additional regulations, how we can manage that as an industry in a sustainable way, and how much all the responsibility and the burden and the financial pressure we can share as many shows.
Absolutely. We can't go there alone. We have to stand together and discuss things, have an open dialogue. Nestor, anything you'd like to say?
I would say that a part of the more business part and governance part, I would say I will put the accent also in the plugin developers or freelance developers out there. Just change a little bit the mindset, more in the way Darius says, change the mindset and say, okay, this is gonna be used by a person ultimately. So let's do this in the correct way and the proper way, in the safest way for them. As business depends on the users, right? So let's do the things in the correct way.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Security by design is playing in other ways.
Yeah, think about the users, think about the risks,
Exactly.
and think also about the competitive opportunities of you getting it right first. So if you think that it's too much of a cost right now, just think what's going to happen when you get it right and your competitors don't, in an era where users care about their data and about their privacy. But thank you for being here, folks. It's been a great chat. And to our audience, I just want to say you don't have to bust out the highlighter pen for the entire CRA. We'll be following up with more materials that everyone from plugin developers to users will be able to use to understand what's happening and what's at the gist and at the soul of this regulation. So folks, thank you. And most of all, thank you to you, our viewers. Have a good one. Stay safe.